Hey everyone, welcome back to Great Sports Debate, and today we return to part 3 of the NBA GOAT series with the most popular player, Michael Jordan. Quick reminder on the criteria we will be using. Production is the top factor. There we're looking to measure a player's peak performance. The second most important factor will be dominance. This is going to show how far above the pack the player was in their era. The third criteria we will be using is impact. This will break out the difference a player made to their team. And winning will be the final criteria. As we all know, it's the ultimate goal, but is impacted not only by a player's teammates, but the teams that they have to face. We all know Mike is the king of popular opinion, so he figures to have a very strong argument in every category. And of course, starting with productivity, he's a beast there. Mike was in the conversation of best player in the league from day one, and almost every Bulls season could be argued as an MVP year. In his 13 Chicago seasons, he averaged 31.5 points per game, 2.5 steals, 6.2 rebounds, 5.3 assists, and almost 9 free throws a game on great efficiency with a .518 effective field goal percentage and 83.8% from the stripe. Not bad for one of the top two-way players in the game. Not only are these numbers nearly unbeatable, but it's over a 13-year period. Now, if you trim it to, say, his third year to first retirement, those numbers are even more impressive. There is maybe one guy that had peak numbers that you can compare to those. Moving to domination, you'll see the numbers everyone throws out. 10 scoring titles, 3 more than anyone else. 5 MVPs, second most ever, but if we're being real, that number should be much higher. I challenge you to look from 87-88 through 92-93 as well as 95-96. All those years should be MVP locks. I challenge anyone in the comment section to dispute any of those years. So that's 8 I'll argue with anybody. I also think he was the best player, having the best year in 96-97. 97-98 is possibly one you could debate, but he did actually win it that year and easily was in that conversation for that year. And he even had the best numbers in 86-87 despite being on a bad team. And even if you didn't think he was the best player his first 3 years, he was definitely in the conversation. And he was, without question, the rest of his Bulls career, outside of possibly 94-95 when he returned. Or, you could argue maybe not in his last Bulls season, but if you look up at his numbers, they compare favorably to all the best players that year as well. And he did actually win MVP that year. Moving on to impact. I think this is probably the part most overlooked. If we're being honest, his high school career is by far the least impressive of the players we have in this conversation. And if we're being honest, his college numbers are not that impressive either. Combine that with the fact he wasn't the best player on the UNC team that won it all, and his Player of the Year campaign later on is one of the least impressive ever. Even in the NBA, MJ's first year was by far the smallest team win improvement of everyone we have in the conversation here, and he started with 3 losing seasons. And even though we know he went on to lead one of the greatest teams ever, after retiring the first time in his prime, the Bulls went from 57 wins and winning the title and playing a close series against the New York Knicks that they wound up finishing off in 6 games to the very next year with very little change to the roster, winning 55 games, only 2 games less, and losing in 7 games to the Knicks, Vice beating them in 6. Now, I get it. They didn't win a title, all that. And that's why these things are sometimes overlooked. But, if we're looking at the evidence, this guy is someone we're talking about as the greatest of all time. Maybe that's the small margin of error. Maybe that's not quite the same impact that we've seen as, a Wilt Chamberlain when he moved teams, a Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, or even a LeBron James. Moving to winning, we'll hear some more of those familiar phrases like 6-0, no game 7s. His 6 titles are the same as Kareem and also the same as LeBron and Wilt combined. And don't even start with the Bill Russell stuff, because that team was loaded in a way that could never happen again today. Not only that, Jordan's play elevated in the playoffs beyond anything I've ever seen, even in some of the series he lost. His 65.9% winning edges both LeBron and Wilt, and even though it's not close to Kareem, he didn't have quite the same teammates. Everyone knows and talks about how dominant Jordan was in the '93 finals, and it was insane. But just look at some of the series he lost to Boston and Detroit, where he was simply unstoppable. And no matter what you think about the '90s, there were many 60-win teams throughout the decade, including Utah multiple times, LA, Phoenix, Seattle multiple times, Miami, Orlando, San Antonio, New York, and Portland. Mike had 8 50-win seasons, but had 5 60-win seasons. And of course, we all know about the 72-10 year. There isn't much of a case to try to make against Mike, honestly. You could point to the impact, but it's still elite. The 5 losing seasons would probably be the biggest thorn, as well as never beating either super team of his era. But you could also say he didn't quite have the horses. There's also a lot I could point to if I looked at the Wizards era, but that was a different league and he was clearly past his prime at that point and still played decent. I also think you could point to the 90s as a weak era, considering the drafts from 85 to 95, the offense, as well as most of the top teams being lesser versions of nobody teams from the 80s. But all of that is still hard to prove, and you could always argue the bad offense was a result of good defense, despite what you might see in some of the video. And really beyond that, you could probably say Mike just was not a good deep shooter, but he really didn't need to be. Despite trying to make a case against Mike, in my opinion, he's in the top tier with one other guy, and he's the best I got to watch consistently. There was no giving up, no load management, and no mercy. There's so much to say about Mike. We didn't even get into how many years he led the league in steals, or all the advanced stats that he dominated more than some of the guys we've already covered as their main talking points. Like all of his great PER seasons. He's number 1 all time in PER for a career. He's had multiple seasons leading the league in win shares of all types. Same thing for box plus or minus, all types. Value over replacement player, multiple years. Usage seasons, usage for a career. It would take probably another 10 minutes just to list all the video game type numbers. If you go by accolades, awards, or popularity, Mike's your guy. If you go by winning, production, or dominance, he's on the short list for all 3 of those. And when you combine it all together, it's very clear why so many people have him at 1. I can see an argument for 1B at the very lowest, and not to LeBron like most of the debates we see. But honestly, there's so much more we could say about Mike, but I'm just trying to hit the main points and the main factors why he's so high in the GOAT series. Not to mention the fact that he was the most popular player in the most popular era of the NBA. If you think I missed anything major for or against, please let me know in the comments, as I try to be as biased, or try to remove any biases I have and just provide the facts. Thanks a lot.